I'm Miranda, 28, and let me tell you something about family surprises. They're not always the heartwarming reunion movies make them out to be. I pulled into the driveway of the house I'd bought my mother 5 years ago, expecting to find her tending her garden or maybe reading on the front porch. Instead, I found her scrubbing the front steps on her hands and knees, wearing a complete maid's uniform like she was hired help in her own home. That's when I knew everything had gone completely wrong. My mother, Rose, looked up from her scrub brush, and when she saw me, she dropped everything and ran toward me sobbing. "Miranda, oh thank God you finally came back. Look what your brother Daniel did to me. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely blindsided by family drama. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Now, let me back up and explain how we got to this point, because this disaster didn't happen overnight. 5 years ago, I was 23 and working as a marketing coordinator in Seattle when I got offered a position with an international company in Tokyo. The salary was triple what I was making, but it meant leaving my mom, who'd been struggling financially since Dad died. Instead of using my signing bonus for myself, I spent 3 months house hunting and found this beautiful place in a great neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, pool, everything Mom deserved after years of sacrifice. I bought it outright and handed her the keys. "You deserve this," I told her as we walked through the empty rooms. "You raised Daniel and me alone. Now it's your turn to have something beautiful." The plan was simple. Mom would have financial security, I'd make great money in Japan, and when I came back, we'd both be in better positions. What could go wrong? Well, apparently everything. Because standing there 5 years later, watching my mother in that degrading uniform, I realized I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Not buying the house, not taking the job, trusting my brother not to destroy everything the moment I left. "Mom, what happened? Why are you dressed like that?" She wiped her eyes, leaving streaks through what I now realized was carefully applied makeup meant to hide exhaustion and defeat. "We need to sit down, honey. There's so much you don't know about what your brother has done." I helped her to the front steps, the same steps she'd been scrubbing like a servant, and prepared myself to hear exactly how badly I'd miscalculated my family's capacity for betrayal. "It started about 6 months after you left," Mom began, her voice shaky as she twisted the cleaning rag in her hands. "Daniel came by with Jessica and little Tommy. You remember how Daniel always was with money." Oh, I remembered all right. My brother had been making his problems everyone else's responsibility since high school. I'd stopped lending him money years ago, but apparently, I'd given him something much more valuable to exploit. He said they were having financial difficulties and needed somewhere to stay for just a few months while he got back on his feet. Jessica was pregnant with their second baby, and I thought— She paused, looking embarrassed. "I thought it would be nice to have family around. The house felt so empty after you left." I could see exactly how this had played out. Daniel showing up with his sad story, Jessica looking tired and pregnant, little Tommy being adorable, Mom's soft heart making it impossible for her to say no. "And you said yes," I said, already knowing how this manipulation worked. What else could I do? They needed help, and I had all this space. It was supposed to be temporary. The word temporary in the Daniel vocabulary meant until someone forces me to leave. I should have warned her about that before I left. What happened next? Well, Jessica was pregnant, and Daniel said she needed the master bedroom because of her condition. They asked if I'd mind moving to the guest room, just until the baby came. My jaw clenched. The master suite was the crown jewel of that house, the one thing I'd specifically wanted my mother to enjoy. The walk-in closet, the beautiful bathroom, the view of the backyard she'd always dreamed of having. "And you moved." "It made sense," she said defensively. "Jessica was carrying my grandchild. I thought it was just for a few months." Famous last words. In Daniel speak, a few months meant forever, and also you'll be paying for the privilege. Then what? Mom's hands started shaking as she continued. Well, money was tight for them. Daniel's job wasn't going well, and Jessica couldn't work because of the pregnancy. They started asking me to help with groceries, utilities, little things here and there. Little things. Right. In my family, little things had a way of becoming major financial obligations faster than you could say family discount. How much money are we talking about? A few hundred a month, sometimes more if they needed special things for the baby. I felt my blood pressure rising. Not only were they living rent-free in the house I'd bought for my mother, they were also extracting monthly payments from her for the privilege of being invaded. And the housework? Mom's face flushed. Well, Jessica couldn't do much because of the pregnancy, and Daniel worked such long hours. It just made sense for me to help out. Making breakfast, doing some laundry, watching Tommy while they ran errands. What kind of errands? Doctor appointments, shopping, job interviews for Daniel? She paused. though the job interviews seemed to happen a lot at restaurants and bars. Of course they did, because Daniel's idea of job hunting had always been more about networking drinks than actual employment. When did it get worse? After the baby was born. Jessica was tired from nursing, and Daniel said he was working extra hours to support his growing family. Somehow I ended up doing all the cooking, cleaning, childcare. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I was basically running a full household for 4 people while they lived like guests in a hotel. And you never thought to say no? I tried a few times, but Jessica would get upset and say I was being selfish. Daniel would remind me how much they were struggling, how they had nowhere else to go. And the children. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. I love those babies, Miranda. I didn't want them to suffer because of adult problems. Classic manipulation. Use the kids as emotional leverage while the adults exploit every boundary in sight. When did you realize it wasn't temporary anymore? Christmas last year. Jessica gave me this uniform. She gestured to the degrading outfit she was wearing and said since I was doing such good work keeping house, I should look professional. I stared at her in disbelief. She gave you a maid's uniform for Christmas? She said it was practical, that if I was going to be the housekeeper, I should dress the part. That's when I felt something crack inside my chest. Not anger yet, but something colder and more dangerous. A complete understanding of exactly how calculated this abuse had been. What finally made you want them to leave? Mom's face crumpled. 2 months ago, I was coming downstairs to get some water late at night. I heard them talking in the kitchen. She took a shaky breath before continuing. Jessica was complaining about me to Daniel. Said she was tired of having his mother around all the time, that she felt like they couldn't relax in their own home. Another pause. And Daniel? Daniel laughed. He said it would solve a lot of problems if I would just die already. The words hit me like a physical blow. My own brother, talking about our mother's death like it would be convenient for him. That's when I knew I had to ask them to leave. And what happened when you did? Mom's expression shifted to something that looked like shame mixed with fear. That's when Daniel showed me the papers I'd signed. What papers? I asked, though I was already getting a sick feeling about where this was heading. About a year ago, Daniel said he was setting up some insurance policies and legal protections for me, in case something happened while you were so far away. Mom pulled a crumpled folder from beside the front door. He said it was just standard paperwork, that he was taking care of family business. She handed me the folder with shaking hands. Inside were several documents that looked official enough at first glance, but something felt off about them immediately. I didn't read them carefully, she admitted. Daniel explained that it was just life insurance beneficiary stuff and some emergency authorizations. I trusted him. Trust. The family weapon that had been turned against her. I scanned the documents quickly, my marketing background helping me spot the inconsistencies. Wrong fonts, weird formatting, obviously copied legal language that didn't quite make sense. But the worst document was at the bottom. A property deed transfer, signing the house over from Rose Martinez to Daniel Martinez. The signature was clearly forged. Nothing like my mother's usual careful handwriting. Mom, when exactly did you sign these? Right after I told them they needed to find their own place. Daniel said we needed to talk about legal arrangements first. Her voice got smaller. He sat me down and said since I was getting older, it made sense to transfer ownership to someone who could handle the responsibilities. And you believed that? He made it sound so reasonable. Said property ownership was a big burden, that I'd be happier not having to worry about taxes and maintenance. She looked at me with eyes full of regret. He said if anything happened to me, you'd have to come all the way back from Japan to deal with selling the house. This way, everything would be handled. The manipulation was so systematic, it was almost impressive. Play on her love for me, her fear of being a burden, her trust in family. Package theft as a favor. What happened after you signed? Daniel's whole attitude changed. Suddenly, he was telling me that since the house belonged to him now, I could either pay rent or earn my keep. Her hands clenched into fists. The rent he quoted was more than my entire Social Security check. So you chose to earn your keep. What choice did I have? I couldn't afford to pay rent, and I had nowhere else to go. Daniel said I could stay if I took care of the household duties. Cooking, cleaning, childcare, laundry. She gestured to the uniform again. Jessica said if I was going to be the help, I needed to look the part. I felt that cold anger growing stronger. They hadn't just stolen her house. They'd systematically destroyed her dignity, her sense of self-worth, her belief that she deserved basic respect. Mom, why didn't you call me? Why didn't you tell me what was happening? And say what? That I'd been stupid enough to sign away the house you worked so hard to buy for me? That I'd let them turn me into a servant in my own home? Tears started flowing again. I was ashamed, Miranda. And I was scared. Scared of what? Scared of what Daniel might do if I caused trouble. He'd gotten so angry when I first asked them to leave, started yelling about how ungrateful I was, how he was sacrificing everything to take care of me. She wiped her eyes, and scared that if you came back and saw what a mess I'd made of everything, you'd be disappointed in me too. That's when I understood the full scope of the psychological damage. They hadn't just stolen her property, they'd convinced her that she deserved the abuse, that asking for help would be a burden, that standing up for herself would make her ungrateful. I stood up abruptly, pulling out my phone. "Miranda, what are you doing?" "Calling the police." "The police?" "But they're family." I looked at her. This woman who'd raised 2 children alone, who'd sacrificed everything for her family, who was now convinced that being treated like garbage was somehow her fault. "Mom, family doesn't forge documents to steal your home. Family doesn't force you to work as unpaid help. And family definitely doesn't joke about wanting you to die." I dialed 911, my hands surprisingly steady despite the rage building in my chest. "911, what's your emergency?" "I'd like to report elder fraud and theft. My brother forged documents to steal my mother's house and has been holding her in what amounts to forced labor." As I gave the dispatcher our address, I saw something flicker in Mom's eyes that I hadn't seen since I'd arrived. For the first time in 5 years, she looked hopeful. Daniel was about to learn that some people fight back. The police arrived within 20 minutes, followed closely by a detective who specialized in elder fraud cases. Detective Sarah Williams was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, who took one look at the forged documents and immediately understood what we were dealing with. "Ma'am, how long has this been going on?" she asked Mom gently. "About 4 years, Mom answered, still seeming surprised that anyone was taking her seriously. Detective Williams examined the fake deed transfer, pointing out obvious problems with the formatting and notarization. This wouldn't fool a first-year law student. The notary seal is fake and the witness signatures are clearly in the same handwriting. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Well, first we need to establish legal ownership. Do you have the original deed and purchase documents?" I pulled out my phone and called my old bank in Seattle, explaining the situation to their fraud department. Within an hour, they'd faxed over copies of all the original purchase documents, showing clear title in Rose Martinez's name. "Perfect," Detective Williams said, reviewing the papers. "Your mother is the legal owner, and these forged documents constitute multiple felonies: forgery, fraud, elder abuse, and potentially theft of services." "Theft of services?" Mom asked. "Ma'am, forcing someone to work without pay in exchange for housing they're legally entitled to anyway is a form of theft, especially when the housing arrangements were obtained through fraudulent means." While Detective Williams worked on the legal side, I started planning the practical side. If Daniel thought he could steal from our family and face no consequences, he was about to get a very unpleasant education. "Mom, where are Daniel and Jessica right now?" "They took the kids to the mall. They usually spend Saturdays shopping and don't come back until evening." "Perfect." That gave us several hours to prepare their welcome home surprise. "Detective Williams, legally speaking, what are our options for getting them out of the house?" "Since your mother is the legal owner and they're residing there based on fraudulent documents, she has every right to evict them immediately. We can escort them off the property and charge them with trespassing if they refuse to leave." "And their belongings?" "Legally, you have to give them reasonable time to collect their possessions, usually 24 to 48 hours. I smiled for the first time since arriving home. "What if we help them pack? You know, as a courtesy?" Detective Williams caught my tone and smiled back. "As long as you don't damage anything. Helping someone pack their belongings is just being neighborly." The next 3 hours were some of the most satisfying of my life. We started with the master bedroom, the one that should have been Mom's sanctuary but had been transformed into Daniel and Jessica's personal palace. Designer clothes filled the entire walk-in closet, definitely not purchased with Daniel's inconsistent income. "How much money has Daniel been making lately?" I asked as we carefully folded Jessica's expensive dresses. "I don't think he's been working much at all," Mom admitted. "Jessica mentioned something about him starting his own consulting business, but I've never seen any evidence of actual clients." So they'd been living completely free, using Mom as unpaid labor while spending money on luxury items. The entitlement was staggering. In what used to be the guest room, now converted to an elaborate nursery, we found thousands of dollars worth of premium baby items. Designer clothes, organic toys, a crib that probably cost more than Mom's monthly Social Security check. "Did they expect you to help pay for any of this?" I asked, gesturing to the expensive setup. Mom nodded miserably. "Jessica said the children deserve the best, and since I wasn't paying rent, I should contribute to my grandchildren's needs. A few $100s a month for baby supplies." I had to stop packing for a moment. They'd been extorting money from her for baby supplies while living completely free in the house she legally owned. The level of manipulation was breathtaking. By 4 p.m., we had everything neatly packed and loaded into a rented moving truck I'd arranged to have delivered. 27 boxes, 12 garbage bags of clothes, furniture, appliances, toys, and enough expensive junk to stock a small department store. "Are you sure about this?" Mom asked as we surveyed our work. "Once they come home and see this?" "Mom, they've been seeing you scrub floors in a maid's uniform. They've been watching you work like a servant in your own home. If they didn't care about your feelings then, why should we care about theirs now?" Detective Williams checked her watch. "I'll have a patrol car stationed nearby in case things get heated. Do you want me to be here when they arrive?" "Actually, I think we can handle this," I said. "But thank you." The locksmith arrived just as we finished loading the truck. Within 30 minutes, every lock on the house had been changed. I handed Mom the new set of keys. "These are yours," I said firmly. "No copies, no spares, no emergency sets for family members who might forge documents." She held the keys like they were made of gold. At 6:30, we heard the familiar sound of Daniel's car in the driveway. Mom grabbed my arm, suddenly nervous. What if they get violent? What if they try to force their way in? Then Detective Williams gets involved and they get arrested for trespassing and attempted breaking and entering. I looked at her seriously. "Mom, you are not the victim here anymore. You are the homeowner and they are trespassers who've been living here illegally." Through the window, I watched Daniel climb out of his BMW, another expensive purchase that made no sense given his supposed financial struggles. Jessica emerged with shopping bags, looking irritated about something. The kids ran around the yard, stepping over boxes they didn't yet understand belonged to them. Daniel's key failed to work in the front door, just as I'd hoped. I heard him try it several times, followed by frustrated cursing and Jessica's demanding voice asking what was wrong. Then came the pounding on the door. I walked over and opened it with my biggest, brightest smile. "Hi, Daniel. Welcome home." The expression on my brother's face was absolutely priceless. Shock, confusion, and then a desperate scramble to regain control of a situation that had just shifted completely out of his favor. "Miranda, what are you doing here? When did you get back?" He was trying to look past me into the house while simultaneously processing why his key hadn't worked. "Oh, I got back this morning," I said pleasantly. "Surprise! I decided to come home and visit Mom in the beautiful house I bought for her." Jessica appeared behind him, loaded down with shopping bags and looking annoyed. "Daniel, why are we standing out here? And why is all our stuff on the lawn?" That's when I got my first really good look at Jessica. Perfectly styled hair, designer outfit, manicured nails, and an expression that suggested she was used to having her problems solved by other people, specifically by the woman she'd been treating as hired help. "Hi, Jessica," I said, extending my hand. "I'm Miranda, Rose's daughter. You know, the one who actually owns this house?" Her face went pale as she realized exactly who I was and what my presence might mean for their comfortable little arrangement. "Mom!" Daniel called, trying to push past me. "What's going on here? Why won't the key work?" "The locks have been changed," I said calmly. "And before you ask, yes, we have every legal right to do that." "What are you talking about? This is my house." I pulled out my phone and showed him the property records Detective Williams had printed for us. "Funny thing about that, Daniel. According to the county clerk's office, this house belongs to Rose Martinez. It always has." Daniel's face went through several emotions before settling on anger. "That's impossible. Mom signed the house over to me years ago." "You mean these documents?" I held up the folder with the forged papers. "The ones with the fake notary seals and obviously forged signatures?" "Yeah, the police were very interested in those." "The police?" Jessica's voice cracked. "Oh, yes. Turns out that forging legal documents to steal someone's home is called elder fraud. It's a felony. Multiple felonies, actually." Daniel was starting to understand that whatever script he'd been following for the past 4 years had just been completely rewritten. "This is insane. Mom wanted me to have the house. She was happy to help with the housework. Mom," he raised his voice, "get out here and explain to your daughter what we agreed to." That's when Mom appeared in the doorway behind me. But this wasn't the defeated, uniformed woman I'd found scrubbing steps that morning. She'd changed into a nice blue dress, done her hair properly, and most importantly, she was standing straight with her shoulders back. "Hello, Daniel," she said quietly. "Hello, Jessica." "Mom, thank God. Tell Miranda about our arrangement. Tell her how you wanted me to have the house." Mom looked at him steadily for a long moment before speaking. "What arrangement would that be, Daniel? The one where you forged documents to steal my home? Or the one where you forced me to work as your unpaid housekeeper while you and Jessica lived like royalty?" "That's not what happened." "Then explain to me what did happen," Mom said, and I was proud of how strong her voice sounded. "Explain why I've been sleeping in the guest room of my own house. Explain why I've been doing your laundry and scrubbing your toilets for 4 years. Explain why Jessica gave me a maid's uniform for Christmas. Jessica's face flushed red. Look, Daniel said it would make you feel more professional. I thought you'd appreciate looking official when you worked around the house. She does. She did. Daniel was getting desperate. Mom, you said you were happy to help with the kids and the cleaning. I said I was happy to help temporarily. Mom corrected him firmly. I never agreed to become your live-in servant. And I certainly never agreed to pay for the privilege of being abused in my own home. The children, who had been playing with toys scattered across the lawn, were starting to notice the tension. Little Tommy, now about 5 years old, tugged on Daniel's shirt. Daddy, why is our stuff outside? Are we moving again? Daniel's face crumpled as reality started sinking in. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. We need to talk about this inside, he said desperately. As a family. We are talking about it, I replied. And this conversation is pretty simple. You stole Mom's house through fraud. You forced her to work as unpaid labor. And now you're going to pack up your things and find somewhere else to live. You can't just kick us out. We have nowhere to go. You should have thought about that before you decided to commit elder fraud. Jessica was looking frantically between Daniel and me, finally understanding that whatever comfortable situation they'd been enjoying was over. Daniel, is this true? Did you really forge documents? He couldn't meet her eyes. Oh my God, Jessica breathed. Daniel, what have you done? I knew something felt wrong, but I convinced myself it was legitimate. I've been living in a stolen house and I let myself believe your mother wanted to work like this. It's not stolen, it's just complicated. No, it's not complicated, I said pleasantly. It's actually very simple. You committed multiple felonies, and now you're facing the consequences. Detective Williams chose that moment to pull up in her patrol car. Daniel's face went completely white. You called the police on your own brother? I called the police on someone who stole from my mother, I corrected. The fact that he's my brother just makes it more disgusting. As Detective Williams approached, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete satisfaction with a family interaction. It was about time someone in this family faced real consequences for their choices. What happened next was exactly what should happen when someone steals from their own mother. Swift, decisive justice with no room for manipulation or guilt trips. Detective Williams reviewed the situation with Daniel and Jessica, while I watched my brother's carefully constructed house of lies collapse in real time. It was better than any revenge fantasy I could have imagined. Mr. Martinez, Detective Williams said professionally, you're under arrest for elder fraud, forgery, and theft of services. Theft of services? Daniel sputtered. Forcing your mother to work without pay in exchange for housing she was legally entitled to anyway constitutes theft of services under state law. Jessica was crying now, but not the manipulative tears she'd probably used to control situations in the past. These were genuine panic tears as she realized the scope of what Daniel had done. What about the children? She asked Detective Williams. We don't have anywhere to go. Ma'am, that's not a legal matter. That's a consequence of your housing arrangements being based on fraudulent documents. I looked at Mom, who was watching her grandchildren with obvious concern, despite everything their parents had put her through. Mom, what do you want to do about Tommy and the baby? She was quiet for a moment, and I could see the internal struggle. These kids hadn't chosen their parents' criminal behavior, but enabling Daniel and Jessica wasn't going to help anyone in the long run. The children can stay here tonight, she said firmly, while Daniel and Jessica figure out their housing situation. But that's all. One night. Jessica looked hopeful for a moment until Mom continued. And Daniel, since you'll be spending tonight in jail while the fraud charges are processed, Jessica will need to handle the children and find temporary housing on her own. Jail? Daniel's voice cracked. Elder fraud is a serious crime, Mr. Martinez, Detective Williams explained. You'll be held until your arraignment tomorrow morning. I watched my brother get handcuffed and put into the back of a police car, and honestly, it felt amazing. After years of watching him manipulate situations and avoid consequences, seeing him finally face real accountability was deeply satisfying. Jessica was left standing in our driveway with 2 confused children, 27 boxes of belongings, and the dawning realization that her comfortable life had been built on crimes against the woman who'd been raising her children for free. Rose, she said tentatively, I want you to know that I never understood what Daniel had done. I thought you'd given him the house. I thought you enjoyed helping with housework. Mom looked at her steadily. Jessica, you gave me a maid's uniform for Christmas. You watched me scrub floors while you got manicures. Did you really think I enjoyed that? Jessica's face flushed. I convinced myself it was practical. Daniel kept saying you'd feel more professional, that you took pride in keeping house perfectly. And I wanted to believe that was true because it made things easier for me. I'm 63, not 93. And even if I were 93, that wouldn't justify treating me like hired help. The moving truck driver, who'd been waiting patiently through the whole drama, approached us about loading the remaining items. "Ma'am, where do you want this stuff delivered?" Jessica looked panicked. "I don't know. We don't have anywhere to go." I pulled out my phone and found the number for a nearby storage facility. "You can have everything put in storage until you figure out your housing situation. I can't afford storage right now." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before living off stolen housing for 4 years," I said pleasantly. Because honestly, Jessica's financial problems were not my mother's responsibility, and they certainly weren't mine. Mom surprised me by pulling out her checkbook. "I'll pay for 1 month of storage," she told Jessica. "After that, you're on your own." Even after everything they'd done to her, Mom was still trying to help. It was exactly the kind of generosity that had gotten her into this mess in the first place, but it was also exactly who she was. "Thank you," Jessica whispered, finally understanding the magnitude of grace she was receiving. As the truck pulled away with their belongings, I helped Mom get the children settled inside. Tommy was confused about why Daddy wasn't coming home, and the baby was fussy from all the commotion. "Are we still going to live with Grandma Rose?" Tommy asked as Mom tucked him into the couch with his favorite blanket. "We'll see, sweetheart," Mom said gently. "Your mommy and Daddy need to find you a new house." After the children were asleep and Jessica had retreated to the guest room, Mom and I finally had a chance to talk alone. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Exhausted," she admitted. "But also lighter somehow. Like I've been holding my breath for 4 years and can finally exhale." We sat on the couch in the living room that was finally hers again, surrounded by silence that felt peaceful instead of oppressive. "Miranda? Yeah? Thank you. For believing me. For fighting for me. For coming home when I needed you. Mom, you don't need to thank me for doing what family should do. But you did what family should do. Daniel did what selfish people do." She was right. And for the first time in 5 years, justice had actually prevailed in our family. Tomorrow, we'd start figuring out what came next. Tonight, we'd just enjoy the peace of being in our own home without anyone exploiting our kindness. Have you ever experienced something like this with your own family? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe because this story is far from over. The next morning, I woke up in my childhood bedroom for the first time in almost 6 years. Mom had kept it exactly the same, which was both touching and slightly embarrassing considering the boy band posters still taped to the walls. But it felt incredible to be home. I found Mom in the kitchen making breakfast for the kids, humming quietly to herself. She was wearing jeans and a comfortable sweater, and for the first time since I'd arrived, she looked genuinely relaxed. "How did you sleep?" I asked, pouring coffee from the pot she'd made. "Better than I have in years," she said with a smile. "It's amazing how comfortable your own bed becomes when you're actually sleeping in it as the homeowner instead of as the live-in help." Jessica appeared in the doorway, looking like she'd been crying most of the night. "Rose, I called my sister in Phoenix. She says we can stay with her for a few weeks while I figure things out." "That's good," Mom replied neutrally. "The thing is, I don't have money for plane tickets for all of us. Daniel usually handles the finances, and with him," she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I looked at Mom, who was already reaching for her purse. Even after everything they'd done, her first instinct was still to help. "Mom, no," I said firmly. "Jessica, you can call Daniel's parents, your parents, friends, whoever. But Mom has already been generous enough." Jessica's face crumpled. "His parents aren't speaking to us. Mine don't have any money. I don't know what to do." That's when something occurred to me. "Jessica, what did you do for work before all this?" "I was a dental hygienist, but I haven't worked in almost 4 years. Dental hygienists are in high demand. You could probably find a job within a week if you actually looked." She stared at me like the concept of solving her own problems had never occurred to her. "But who would watch the children while I work?" "Daycare, like millions of other working parents. But daycare is so expensive." I looked at this woman who'd been living rent-free while using my mother as unpaid childcare and felt my patience evaporating. "Jessica, you've had 4 years of free housing and free childcare. If you didn't use that time to save money or maintain your professional skills, that's a choice you made. Not a problem Mom needs to solve." Jessica left to make phone calls about plane tickets, and Mom and I spent the morning playing with the kids and starting the process of reclaiming her house. The first thing we did was move her belongings back into the master bedroom where they belonged. Her clothes looked lost in the huge walk-in closet after years of being crammed into the tiny guest room space, but she'd grow into it again. "I forgot how beautiful this room is," she said, sitting on the bed and looking around at the space she'd been exiled from for 4 years. "It's your room, Mom. It was always supposed to be your room." We spent the afternoon going through the house, deciding what changes to make now that it was truly hers again. The living room furniture Daniel and Jessica had brought would need to be replaced, since it had gone to storage with the rest of their belongings. The kitchen could use updating. The backyard was ready for the garden she'd always wanted, but never had time to plant. "You know what I want to do first?" she said as we stood in the backyard, looking at the empty space. "What?" "Plant tomatoes. I've always wanted to grow my own tomatoes." It seemed like such a simple thing, but I could see how much it meant to her. For 4 years, she hadn't been allowed to want anything for herself. Now she was remembering what it felt like to have preferences, to make plans, to imagine a future. Jessica found us in the backyard later that afternoon. "I got plane tickets for tomorrow morning. My sister wired me money." "That's good," Mom said. "I'm glad you have family to help you." "Rose, I want you to know how sorry I am. I never understood what Daniel had done." Mom was quiet for a moment before responding. "Jessica, you gave me a maid's uniform and watched me clean your toilets for Christmas presents. Even if you didn't know about the forged documents, you knew I was being treated poorly." Jessica nodded, tears starting again. "You're right. I should have questioned it. I should have treated you better. The children can visit," Mom added, "but that will depend on how you and Daniel handle yourselves going forward. If there's any more drama, any more attempts to manipulate or take advantage, those visits will stop." "I understand." That evening, Daniel was released on bail pending trial. He came to collect Jessica and the kids, and the conversation was mercifully brief. "This isn't over, Miranda," he said as he loaded suitcases into his car. "You can't just destroy our family like this." "I didn't destroy anything," I replied calmly. "I just stopped enabling your theft and abuse." "Mom needed help. I was helping her. By stealing her house and forcing her to work as your servant? She was lonely. She wanted us around." I looked at Mom, who was holding her granddaughter one last time before they left. "Mom, were you lonely?" "Yes," she said simply. "But I was lonelier living in a house full of people who treated me like I didn't matter than I ever was living alone." That seemed to hit Daniel harder than anything else. For just a moment, his mask slipped, and I saw something that might have been shame, but it didn't last long. "You'll regret this," he said as he got into his car. "When you realize what you've done to your own family, you'll regret it." "Maybe," I said, "but I doubt it." After they left, Mom and I sat on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Are you okay?" I asked. I'm sad about the children," she admitted. "But I'm not sad about standing up for myself. For the first time in 4 years, I feel like I'm living in my own home instead of just existing in someone else's space." "What do you want to do now?" "Live," she said simply. "I want to plant that garden. I want to paint again. I used to love watercolors. I want to take that pottery class at the community center I've been thinking about for years." "What's stopping you?" "Nothing," she said with a smile. "For the first time in years, absolutely nothing is stopping me." 2 weeks later, our house looked like it belonged to Mom again. We'd retrieved her furniture from storage, bought new pieces to replace what Daniel and Jessica had taken, and most importantly, filled the space with things that made her happy. The guest room had been converted into an art studio with good lighting, storage for supplies, and a comfortable chair by the window, where she could work on watercolors while looking out at the garden she was finally free to design. "Miranda, come see this," she called from the backyard one afternoon. I found her in the garden, wearing old jeans and a wide-brimmed hat, her hands dirty from planting. She'd spent the morning at the nursery and had come home with enough plants to transform the entire space. "Look," she said proudly, gesturing to a section where she'd planted tomatoes, herbs, and some kind of flowering bush. "This is going to be beautiful in a few months." "It's already beautiful," I said. And I meant it. Not just the garden, but seeing her engaged in something that brought her genuine joy. "I forgot how much I missed this," she said, pulling off her gardening gloves. "Having dirt under my fingernails, planning where things should go, watching something grow." We'd also enrolled her in that pottery class she'd mentioned, and twice a week she'd come home covered in clay, excited to show me whatever wonky bowl or lopsided vase she'd created. "I'm terrible at it," she'd laugh, "but it's so satisfying to make something with my hands." The watercolors were coming along beautifully too. She'd started with simple flower studies but had gradually become more ambitious. Her latest project was a series of paintings showing our backyard in different seasons, imagining how the garden would look as it grew. But the biggest change wasn't in the house or the garden. It was in Mom herself. "You know what I realized?" she said one evening as we sat on the back porch admiring her work. "What's that?" "For 4 years, I forgot that I was allowed to want things. Daniel and Jessica had me so focused on what they needed, what the kids needed, what would make them happy, that I stopped thinking about what might make me happy. And now? Now I'm remembering, like, I think I want to travel. Nothing fancy, but maybe drive up the coast, visit some of those little artisan towns I always meant to see." "That sounds perfect. And I've been thinking about getting a dog." A little rescue that needs a good home. I smiled. I think that's a great idea. Daniel would have said it was too much work, too much responsibility. Jessica would have worried about pet hair and allergies. But Daniel and Jessica don't live here anymore. No, they don't. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. The legal situation was progressing exactly as it should. Daniel's lawyer had tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't interested in going easy on elder fraud. The case was solid, the evidence was overwhelming, and Daniel was looking at serious jail time. Any word from Jessica? I asked. She sends pictures of the kids sometimes, Mom said. They're staying with her sister in Phoenix. She got a job at a dental clinic there. That's good. She needed to remember how to support herself. The pictures show the children are doing well. Maybe this situation will actually be better for them in the long run. I thought about that. Kids growing up watching their father manipulate and steal from family members wasn't exactly setting a good example. Learning that actions have consequences might actually be the best lesson they could get from this mess. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you miss them? I mean, apart from the kids, do you miss having Daniel and Jessica around? She thought about it seriously before answering. I miss the idea of them. I miss what I thought we were, a family helping each other through difficult times. But I don't miss being taken advantage of. I don't miss feeling like a servant in my own home. And you don't feel guilty about what happened? I feel sad that it came to this. I feel sad that Daniel chose to handle his problems by hurting other people. But guilty? She shook her head. No, I'm done feeling guilty for refusing to be abused. That night, I called my old boss in Tokyo to give my formal notice. It was a difficult conversation. The job had been incredible, and I'd learned so much, but my mind was made up. You're doing the right thing, he said. Family comes first. But if you ever want to come back, you'll always have a place here. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The next morning, Mom and I were having coffee when she brought up something she'd been thinking about. Miranda, what are your plans? I mean, long term. Are you planning to stay here permanently? I'd been wondering when this conversation would come. I've been thinking about starting my own consulting business, international marketing, helping American companies expand into Asian markets. With video conferencing and everything, I could do it from anywhere. Even from here? Even from here. If you don't mind having a roommate while I get established. Her face lit up. I'd love that. This house is too big for just me anyway, and after 4 years of having it filled with people who made me feel unwelcome, it would be wonderful to share it with someone who actually wants to be here. There's just one condition. What's that? I pay rent, market rate, plus half the utilities. Miranda, you don't need to pay me rent. You bought this house. I bought it for you, Mom, which means you're the landlord and I'm the tenant, and tenants pay rent. She laughed. When you put it like that, how can I argue? That afternoon, I officially launched my consulting business from the desk in Mom's old guest room, now converted to my temporary office. My first client was a Seattle-based coffee company looking to expand into the Japanese market. It felt amazing to be working for myself, building something new, while also being close to the family member who actually deserved my time and attention. Miranda, Mom called from the kitchen. Yeah? I'm proud of us. For what? For not letting Daniel win. For refusing to accept that being treated badly is just something women in this family have to tolerate. I looked at this incredible woman who'd raised 2 children alone, survived 4 years of psychological abuse, and found the strength to fight back when it mattered most. I'm proud of us too, Mom. 3 months after Daniel's dramatic exit, our new life had settled into a rhythm that felt both peaceful and productive. Mom's garden was flourishing, my consulting business was growing, and for the first time in years, we were both genuinely happy. Then Daniel called. I was in my home office reviewing contracts when I heard Mom's voice from the kitchen, sharp with tension. No, Daniel, that's not going to work. What do you mean, contest the ownership? On what grounds? I grabbed my phone and texted our lawyer immediately. David Chen had been handling Daniel's criminal case and keeping us updated on his various legal maneuvers. Daniel, listen to me carefully, I heard Mom continue, and I was proud of how strong her voice sounded. The property records are clear. Your fake documents have been turned over to the prosecutor's office. If you want to continue down this path, I'm ready to press additional charges. There was a long pause while she listened to whatever nonsense Daniel was spouting now. No, the children cannot move back in with me while you figure out your housing situation. You made your choice when you decided to steal my home and treat me like hired help. Another pause. I'm hanging up now, Daniel. Don't call here again unless you're ready to apologize sincerely and discuss supervised visits with your children. She hung up and came into my office, looking shaken but determined. What was that about? I asked. Daniel's lawyer apparently thinks they can challenge the property ownership based on implied contracts and verbal agreements. He wants to claim that I verbally gave him the house in exchange for his help with household maintenance. I stared at her. He's doubling down? Seems like it. And get this. He's also claiming that kicking him out constitutes elder abuse because I'm denying him the ability to care for his aging mother. The audacity was breathtaking. After years of actual elder abuse, Daniel was now trying to claim that stopping his abuse constituted abuse. My phone buzzed. David was calling back. "Miranda, I got your text. What's happening now?" I explained Daniel's latest legal strategy while Mom sat in my office chair looking tired. "Implied contracts?" David laughed, but not in a funny way. "Based on what evidence? His word against his mother's? With forged documents already submitted to the court? What do? We let him try. Any competent lawyer will take one look at this case and either refuse to take it or charge Daniel a fortune up front. The evidence is overwhelmingly against him. And if he does find someone desperate enough to represent him, then we countersue for harassment, emotional distress, and legal fees. We'll make it so expensive for him to pursue this that he'll wish he'd just accepted the criminal charges quietly." After I hung up, I looked at Mom. She was staring out the window at her garden, where her tomatoes were starting to ripen. "Are you okay?" "I'm angry," she said simply. "For 4 years, I tried to keep the peace. I accepted every excuse, every rationalization, every reason why I should just put up with being treated poorly. And now?" She turned to look at me, and her expression was fierce in a way I'd never seen before. "Now I'm done protecting Daniel from the consequences of his choices." The next day, we drove to the courthouse together. Mom had decided to file additional charges for harassment and to request a formal restraining order. It wasn't an easy decision for her. Despite everything, he was still her son. But she'd realized that Daniel would never stop trying to manipulate the situation unless there were serious consequences. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Martinez?" the prosecutor asked. "Once we expand the charges to include harassment and attempted fraud, this becomes a much more serious case." "I'm sure," Mom said firmly. "My son needs to learn that stealing is wrong, even when you steal from family, especially when you steal from family." The formal charges were amended that afternoon. In addition to the original elder fraud and forgery charges, Daniel was now facing harassment, attempted fraud, and violation of the conditions of his bail. Jessica called that evening crying again. "Rose, please, can't you make this stop? Daniel is talking about taking this to trial, and our lawyer says that could mean years of legal battles." "Jessica, Daniel is the one who expanded this fight. All he had to do was accept responsibility for what he did and complete his community service quietly. But a trial will cost so much money. We're already struggling to pay for our lawyer. Then maybe Daniel should have thought about that before he decided to forge more legal documents and file frivolous lawsuits. He's just desperate, Rose. He feels like he's lost everything." Mom was quiet for a long moment before responding. "Jessica, Daniel lost his family's trust when he chose to steal from me rather than ask for help honestly. He lost his home when he chose fraud over hard work, and he's losing his freedom because he can't accept responsibility for his choices. But what about the children? They miss their grandmother. The children are welcome to visit once this legal situation is resolved and Daniel stops trying to manipulate and harass me. Until then, they'll have to learn that family relationships have boundaries." After Jessica hung up, Mom and I sat on the back porch again, surrounded by the garden she'd created in the space she was finally free to call her own. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked, standing up to him, pressing charges, all of it. "No," she said without hesitation. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that Daniel chose manipulation over honesty. But I don't regret learning that I'm worth fighting for." That night, I lay awake thinking about family dynamics and the difference between love and enabling. For years, Mom had convinced herself that tolerating abuse was the loving thing to do, that keeping peace was more important than demanding respect. But real love, the kind that actually helps people grow and become better, sometimes requires setting boundaries. Sometimes it means letting people face the consequences of their choices instead of constantly rescuing them from their own bad decisions. Daniel was about to learn that lesson the hard way. 6 months after our confrontation with Daniel, I was sitting in my home office when David called with news about the criminal case. "He's pleading guilty to all charges," David said without preamble. His lawyer finally convinced him that going to trial would result in significantly more jail time. "What's the plea deal?" 2 years probation, restitution for all the money your mother spent on storage and expenses during the fraud period, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent restraining order. He also has to pay court costs and legal fees. How much restitution are we talking about? About $15,000. That includes the storage fees, the extra utilities and maintenance costs, and the money she paid for baby supplies and groceries while they were living there illegally. After I hung up, I went downstairs to tell Mom. I found her in her art studio, working on a landscape painting of our backyard. The watercolors had gotten dramatically better over the past few months. Daniel's case is settled, I told her, explaining the terms of the plea agreement. She set down her brush and was quiet for a moment. How do you feel about it? I asked. Relieved, she said finally. And sad. I never wanted it to come to this, but I'm glad it's over. The restraining order means he can't contact you directly for 5 years. If he wants to see the kids, it has to go through Jessica or supervised by the court. I know. Maybe that's for the best. The children don't need to be exposed to more conflict. Mom had been seeing Tommy and the baby occasionally, but always at neutral locations and never when Daniel was around. Jessica had been surprisingly cooperative about maintaining the relationship, possibly because she was genuinely horrified by what Daniel had done. I have some other news, I said, settling into the chair by the window that had become my favorite spot in the house. Good news or concerning news? Good news. Great news, actually. I just signed my 5th major client. The business is officially successful enough to support both of us very comfortably. Mom smiled broadly. Miranda, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you for taking that leap. Which brings me to my next announcement. I'd like to make our living arrangement official. Market rate rent, half utilities, and a formal lease agreement. You really don't need to pay me rent. This is your home too. Actually, I do need to pay rent. Because you're not just my mother, you're my landlord. And landlords deserve to be paid fairly when their adult children live with them. She laughed. When you put it like that, how can I refuse? That evening, we were having dinner on the back porch when Mom brought up something she'd been thinking about. Miranda, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Okay. Do you think I'm weak for letting Daniel take advantage of me for so long? The question caught me off guard. Mom, what are you talking about? I mean, I let him live here for 4 years. I let him turn me into a servant in my own home. I signed documents without reading them carefully. Any reasonable person would have stopped it much sooner. I looked at this woman who'd raised 2 children alone after my father's death, who'd worked multiple jobs to keep us fed and housed, who'd survived 4 years of psychological manipulation and still found the strength to fight back when it mattered. Mom, you're not weak. You're trusting. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. Weak people don't survive what you survived. Weak people don't find the courage to press criminal charges against their own children. Weak people don't rebuild their lives at 63. She was quiet, considering my words. You know what I think happened? I continued. I think Daniel exploited the fact that you're a good person. He took advantage of your generosity, your love for your grandchildren, and your desire to help family in need. That's not weakness on your part. That's manipulation on his. But I should have seen through it sooner. Maybe. But the fact that you eventually did see through it and then took action to stop it is what matters. How many people stay in bad situations because they're too afraid or too beaten down to fight back? She nodded slowly. When you put it that way, Mom, you're not a victim anymore. You're a survivor. And there's a big difference between those two things. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, Mom knocked on my door. Miranda, I've been thinking about something. What's that? I want to do something meaningful with this house. Something that honors what we've been through but also helps other people. What did you have in mind? I've been researching programs that provide temporary housing for women who are leaving difficult family situations, not just domestic violence, but financial abuse, elder abuse, situations like mine where family members take advantage of each other. I sat down on my bed, intrigued. Tell me more. Well, this house has 4 bedrooms. We're using 2. What if we use the other 2 to help women who need a safe place to stay while they figure out their next steps? The idea was both generous and brilliant. Mom had learned firsthand how isolating and degrading family abuse could be. Who better to help other women navigate their way out of similar situations? It would mean background checks, training, working with social services, I said, thinking through the logistics. I know. I've already started looking into the requirements. It would be a lot of work, but I think it could be really meaningful. I thought about it. The house certainly had the space, and Mom had the empathy and experience to be genuinely helpful to women in crisis. Okay, I said. Let's do it. Really, but on one condition. What's that? We do it right. Professional standards, proper support systems, legal protections. If we're going to help people, we're going to help them well. Mom's face lit up with excitement. Miranda, this could be amazing. We could actually turn what happened to us into something that helps other people. Looking at her enthusiasm, I realized something important. This wasn't just about helping other women. This was about Mom reclaiming her sense of purpose and turning her painful experience into something meaningful. Let's start making some calls tomorrow, I said. I know some people in the nonprofit world who might be able to help us get started. For the first time since I'd come home, I felt like we weren't just recovering from what Daniel had done to us. We were building something better than what we'd had before. 1 year later, Rose House officially opened as a transitional housing program for women leaving financially abusive family situations. Mom had gotten certified as a peer counselor, and we'd partnered with 3 local nonprofits to provide comprehensive support services. Our first resident was a woman named Sandra, whose adult son had been stealing her disability checks and forcing her to care for his children while he spent her money on drugs. Watching Mom work with Sandra, seeing her slowly regain confidence and independence, was like watching my mother's own healing process reflected and amplified. You know what the best part is? Mom said one evening, as we sat in the garden that was now blooming beyond anything she'd originally imagined. What's that? I spent 4 years being made to feel small and powerless. Now I get to help other women remember how strong they really are. The transformation in Mom had been remarkable. The scared, defeated woman I'd found scrubbing steps in a maid's uniform had evolved into a confident advocate for women's rights. She spoke at community center workshops, consulted with social workers on elder abuse cases, and had become something of a local expert on financial exploitation within families. "Miranda, phone for you," she called from the kitchen one afternoon. "It's someone from the newspaper." The local paper wanted to do a feature story on Rose House and our success helping women transition out of abusive family situations. In just 1 year, we'd helped 12 women find safe housing, employment, and independence. "We don't want to be famous," I told the reporter. "We just want to help people." "But your story is inspiring," she insisted. A mother and daughter turning their own trauma into a program that helps other families heal. After some discussion, Mom and I agreed to the interview, but with conditions. No last names, no photos of current residents, and a focus on the program's success rather than the sensational aspects of Daniel's crimes. The article ran 2 weeks later with the headline, "Local Women Turn Family Crisis into Community Solution." But it was tasteful, informative, and generated enough interest that we had a waiting list of women seeking help. It also unfortunately attracted Daniel's attention. He called Mom's number, forgetting about the restraining order in his apparent fury over seeing our success in print. "Mom, this is ridiculous." His voice came through the answering machine. "You're making me look like some kind of criminal in the newspaper. All I did was try to help you manage the house, and now you're telling everyone I'm an abuser?" I looked at Mom, who was listening to the message with a mixture of sadness and determination. "Should we call the police?" I asked. "Yes," she said firmly. "He knows he's not supposed to contact me. If he wants to be angry about how his choices are being perceived, he can discuss that with his probation officer." The police responded quickly, and Daniel was arrested for violating his restraining order. This time, there was no bail, and he spent 2 weeks in jail before his probation hearing. "You know what?" Mom said after we got the call that he'd been taken into custody. "I don't feel sorry for him anymore. No? He had every opportunity to accept responsibility for what he did, complete his community service quietly, and rebuild his relationship with his family through honest effort. Instead, he's still trying to make himself the victim." She was right. Daniel had chosen to see our success as an attack on him rather than recognizing it as healing from the damage he'd caused. Jessica, meanwhile, had been thriving in Phoenix. She'd been promoted to office manager at her dental clinic, found a nice apartment, and was raising the children as a single mother while Daniel dealt with his legal issues. "The kids ask about their father sometimes," she told Mom during one of their monthly phone calls. "I tell them he's working on becoming a better person, but that it's taking longer than expected." "That's probably the most honest way to explain it," Mom replied. The children visited us twice that year, always with Jessica, never mentioning Daniel. They seemed happy, well-adjusted, and much calmer than they'd been during the chaos of living in a stolen house with criminally irresponsible parents. "Grandma Rose, your house is so pretty now," Tommy said during their summer visit, running around the garden and admiring the flowers. "Thank you, sweetheart. I worked very hard to make it beautiful. Are you happy here?" Mom looked around at the life we'd built. The thriving garden, the house full of women learning to rebuild their lives, my successful business operating from the upstairs office, and the peaceful satisfaction of being in our own home without anyone exploiting our kindness. "Yes," she said simply. "I'm very happy here." That evening, after Jessica and the kids had gone back to their hotel, Mom and I sat on the back porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Miranda? Yeah? Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come home when you did?" I thought about it seriously. "I think you would have figured it out eventually. Maybe it would have taken longer. Maybe it would have been harder, but you're stronger than you realized back then." "I'm not sure about that." "I am. Mom, You survived 4 years of psychological manipulation and still had enough fight left in you to press criminal charges against your own son. That takes incredible strength. She was quiet for a moment, watching fireflies begin to flicker in the growing darkness. I'm proud of what we've built here, she said finally. Me too. Not just the house program, though that's wonderful. I'm proud that we learned how to set boundaries, that we learned the difference between helping family and enabling them. I looked at this remarkable woman who'd gone from victim to survivor to advocate, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the family I'd chosen to prioritize. I'm proud of us too, Mom. 2 years after Daniel's arrest, I was working in my office when Mom knocked on the door with a letter in her hand. This came today, she said, holding up an envelope addressed in handwriting I recognized as my brother's. Do you want me to read it first? I asked. No, I think I can handle whatever he has to say. She opened it carefully and read silently for several minutes, her expression shifting from caution to sadness to something that might have been relief. What does it say? I asked when she finished. It's an apology. A real one this time. He says prison gave him time to think about what he'd done, and he finally understands how much he hurt me. Daniel had served 8 months in jail after violating his restraining order multiple times and failing to complete his community service. The judge had finally run out of patience with his excuses and manipulation attempts. Do you believe him? Mom was quiet for a moment. I think he's sorry about the consequences he faced. Whether he's truly sorry about what he did to me, I don't know. What else does he say? He wants to know if we can have a supervised visit when he gets out next month. Just him. No demands about the house or money or anything else. He says he wants to try to earn back some small part of our relationship. How do you feel about that? Tired, she admitted. I'm tired of being angry with him, but I'm also not ready to forget what he's capable of when he wants something. We talked about it over the next few weeks, and finally decided on a trial meeting at the community center where Mom taught her financial literacy classes for abuse survivors. Neutral ground, public space, and limited time. Daniel looked older when he walked in, thinner and more subdued than I'd ever seen him. Prison had clearly been difficult for him, which felt like appropriate consequences for someone who'd made other people's lives difficult for so long. Mom, he said quietly, thank you for agreeing to see me. Hello, Daniel. The conversation was awkward and stilted, but it was also honest in a way that family conversations never had been before. Daniel didn't try to minimize what he'd done or make excuses for his behavior. He acknowledged that he'd stolen from our mother, that he'd treated her terribly, and that he'd earned every consequence he'd faced. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did wrong. What did you do wrong? Mom asked directly. I took advantage of your kindness. I stole your home and your dignity. I treated you like you owed me something when actually, you didn't owe me anything. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was more accountability than he'd ever shown before. What do you want from me now? Mom asked. Nothing, he said. And for the first time in his adult life, I actually believed him. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I'm trying to become someone better than who I was. The visit lasted an hour. No demands, no manipulation, no requests for money or housing or anything else. Just a conversation between a mother and son who were trying to figure out if there was any relationship worth salvaging from the wreckage of what had come before. After he left, Mom and I walked through the community center garden, a smaller version of the one she'd created at home. How do you feel? I asked. Sad, mostly. Sad about all the time we wasted, all the pain we could have avoided if he'd just learned to ask for help honestly instead of taking what he wanted. Do you think he's changed? I think prison scared him. Whether that fear will translate into lasting change, she shrugged. That's not really my responsibility anymore. That evening, we got a call from Sandra, our first Rose House resident, who was calling to tell us she'd just gotten promoted to assistant manager at her job and had saved enough money to put a down payment on a small house. I never could have done this without you, she told Mom. You showed me that I was worth fighting for. After we hung up, Mom and I sat in our usual spot on the back porch, surrounded by the garden that had grown more beautiful each year. You know what I've learned? Mom said as we watched the sunset. What's that? For 65 years, I thought being a good woman meant making everyone else comfortable, even when it made me miserable. Turns out being a good woman means knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone convince you you're worth less than you are. I looked around at the life we'd built together. The house was full but peaceful, productive but calm. Mom's artwork hung on the walls alongside paintings from some of our residents. The garden bloomed with vegetables and flowers that fed everyone who lived here. Most importantly, it was a place where women learned that they deserved respect, safety, and the chance to build lives on their own terms. Miranda? Yeah? I'm glad you came home. I'm glad I did too. As the sun disappeared behind the trees, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and purple, I realized something important. We'd started this journey trying to get back what was stolen from us. Instead, we'd discovered something much more valuable: the knowledge that we were worth protecting, worth fighting for, and worth the effort it takes to build a life based on respect rather than obligation. Daniel could keep his apologies and his attempts at redemption. We'd already found something better: the peace that comes from knowing exactly what we would and wouldn't tolerate, and the strength to enforce those boundaries without apology. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even with people who hurt you. Sometimes it's building something so beautiful and meaningful from the wreckage they left behind that their damage becomes irrelevant. Mom? Yes? Want to go start planning next year's garden? I thought you'd never ask. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about family, justice, and finding the strength to stand up for what's right. Because sometimes the most important victory isn't defeating the people who hurt you. It's refusing to let their choices define the rest of your life.